Welcome into another fresh shave where I give first impression reviews of new music releases. My name's Regan, and today we are covering the Great Elven War by Brisbane symphonic death metal band Darklore. I say symphonic death metal, they've also got some black metal elements in, and I think for being so fantasy themed, they often get a folk tag attached to them. I probably would have called them like a folky melodeath band, but let's not get too bogged down in genres. Before I get into it, I would like to just touch on the album art, like I've done in the past, because they've got an amazing piece of album art. Very similar feelings to what I said in the Mammon's Throne review, where we've got this really cool dark scene playing out, but it is surprisingly vibrant for the darkness, where, there's really cool contrast between these light blues and stark reds with kind of the frosty magic meeting the blood spraying around, and it's just a very violent scene. It once again just hits the cool factor. I look at that's something that I want to pick up when I see it on a shelf. I'm like, oh man, I want to look at it closer, I want to see the details, I want to hold it, I want to flip it over, see if the art continues on the back. It's a real eye catcher, A+ album artwork. Sadly not credited as far as I can tell. I checked Metal Archives and Bandcamp, so whoever did that, you absolutely killed it. If the band sees this, make sure you credit your artist. Now, as I've said in past reviews, I do not vibe heavily with genres that have a lot of long songs like Doom or prog. Plenty of exceptions, but as a general rule, I just don't have the patience for it. And I kind of dreaded going into this knowing that it's 8 songs and an hour and 10 minutes. An hour and 10 minutes is just a long time for any album. So a little bit worried off the bat, especially when I look at bands that I would consider their contemporary in both the local and international scenes, so maybe like a Valhalla locally and something like an Ensiferum, however you pronounce it, globally. None of them are writing albums this long, and in my opinion, I think there's a reason for that. I don't think it really suits the style. I don't think this genre lends itself to consistently long songs. And to rip the band-aid off early, as I expected, they were just too long. There are so many natural stopping points for the songs on the album that they just blow right past. And at some points, these stopping points are like in the middle of a song. So, you're 4 minutes in and you look at the track and you're like, alright, it's not going anywhere, and you realize you've got another 4 minutes left to go. There's even some particularly egregious moments where there are drawn-out intros or outros. I'm like, guys, come on. Wrap it up. Brevity is the soul of wit, alright? This doesn't need to be 70 minutes long. No album needs to be 70 minutes long. And I'm sure there's some nerd who probably just heard that and went, actually, this prog masterpiece, or, this double album that is highly regarded. Alright, whatever. And sure, I can concede, long songs are fine if you have enough interesting content to fill them, and if there's enough elements and, it does something, it goes somewhere, it moves, it has a reason for its length, but unfortunately just a lot of these songs don't. I think the most glaring point of, a lack of evolution across the long songs and the long album are the vocals. In my opinion, it doesn't match the epic fantasy narrative song structures. I might be more forgiving for the length and the pacing if I could understand the story and invest myself in the narrative. And it's a little bit of a mix issue because there are points where I'm like, oh cool, I did catch that line, but it's mostly just the style. There's just too much in the scream to really hear what's going on and following it. So I don't think just fixing the mixing issues would fix the entire song. One solution might be adding a second vocalist, so you've got a bit of variety in style, so at least it's not getting stale over a 10-minute song, because the vocals are probably the thing there is the least variety of from start to finish. It's just the same style and tone throughout the entire album. And it's a huge shame too, because they're covering some really beloved franchises of mine, things like Lord of the Rings, Skyrim, Diablo. I should be absolutely frothing a 10-minute long Diablo fantasy metal track, but I can't even really understand what's going without a lyric book, so I'm disappointed. And I think that's the problem, is that expectations are risen because they're covering something I love and then they're not meeting it, so the disappointment feels even worse. And I'm not saying that they should go full clean vocals or anything like that, But maybe look at something like a Karakangren as a great example of how to have intelligible lyrics and storytelling in extreme metal. And it's not even that it's a bad vocal style in isolation. It reminds me a lot of Immortal. So, maybe, with other black metal stylings, something like Falconback might be a more apt comparison. But yeah, just for what they're doing, I just don't think it works. Now, I mentioned the mix before. The mix is serviceable, but every now and then, there'll be something that is just really forward in it. For example, in Hunting Grounds, it's the keys. In Beasts of Beauclair, it's the bass is really loud. And they're not bad parts either. In fact, both of them, it's a really good piano section. It's a really good bass line. But it's just so forward that I've got my headphones in. I'm like, have I turned on bass boost by accident? This is so loud compared to the rest of the song. And it pushes other parts, like the vocals, beneath it down. As a whole, though, the instrumentals are good. The riffs are enjoyable. The keys really complete the atmosphere, but also stand out as an instrument instead of just being a glorified backing track. I've said it a million times now. If you can't distinctly make out the keys, fuck the keyboard off and just play to a backing track. Not the case for Darklore. You can really hear the keys, sometimes too much, as I've mentioned, but they're really good sections. If anything, I think what's missing is kind of got all the pieces there. It's what's missing is this songwriting sensibility to say, that's enough, or we don't need that part, or it's a good part, but let's save it for a future track. I think that most of the songs could actually be reworked into something shorter and better, a bit punchier, to essentially get to the point of the narrative, and I don't think you'd be sacrificing any of the scale or atmosphere that they're trying to build in doing so. The only song that I'd cut completely is The North Remembers. It's notably weak, boring, and it's right in the middle of the album. It's like the Wednesday of the album. It's just a hump you have to get over if you want to hear the second half of the album. I would, trash that one completely. What did surprise me about this album, though, is that at no point during it did I feel like I wanted to turn it off. I'm sure I wanted to skip track on The North Remembers, but that's all. And the other parts, I was still enjoying myself, but every song had a point where the enjoyment noticeably started dipping, and I just want to skip to the next track so I can hit that high again and be like, oh, cool, it's something fresh, something new. So, like I said, I think they just need to trim everything down a bit so you don't hit that point of fatigue in the song. Because if you're going to write a long journey of an album, you really need to put focus on bringing the listener along for the journey, and you need to make that journey something worth the listener's investment to do that. So all in all, as an album, some killer, way too much filler, and it just needs a lot of polishing at the songwriting and mixing stages. It is growing on me with each listen. I like I said, I really like the keys, and as I pick up little bits of the lyrics, it's fleshing out the narratives, and I'm enjoying it a little bit more, but I want to love it, and there's just too many points where I'm not loving it. So, you could listen to worse albums, especially if you're in this space of kind of fantasy metal meets extreme metal, but just like you could do better, I think they could do better as well. And honestly, this is a huge step up from their first album, so I don't reckon we've hit peak Darklore yet. I think hopefully the third album, or maybe past that at some point, Darklore will just put out an absolute ripper album. And I'm staying tuned for that, but I don't think it's the Great Elven War. Hey, maybe if I'm lucky one day they'll come to the same conclusions that I have, and they'll put out the Great Elven War abridged, and it'll be everything I ever wanted, but a man can dream. Other than that, if you've given this a listen, let me know what you think in the comments. If you haven't given this a listen, I think it's still worth a listen. I just don't think it's going to be in my, constantly played on repeat at the end of the year. That aside, though, I've been Regan Boyce, aka Pink Demon. Thank you so much for watching up to this point. If you want to hear more album reviews, like and subscribe for more. Otherwise, peace out.